Welcome, everybody, to Westchester Eye on the radio. I'm Peter Moses with my co-host John Charan and Ardina Seward. And how are you guys doing today?
Doing great. You heard the beginning of a song by the American Nomads. It's called 1969, and they will be at the Catskill Distilling Company on May 11th, which is a Saturday, up in Bethel, New York. And John, I just hired your spot.
And we know what else happened in Bethel, New York.
That's right. Oh, and this is...
They don't call it... It's Bethel.
Bethel, which is...
Bethel is a synagogue somewhere.
But
There's a place in Israel.
Bethel,
New York.
We just put the emphasis on the wrong syllable.
And the show, the show is on the money today because for everybody out there, Woodstock... This is such a shanda.
We knew this already.
No, you did not know. Woodstock, the Woodstock 50th anniversary revival is done. Is canceled.
See, the thing is, there were two of them scheduled. One of them at the original site in Bethel, New York.
Which is still on.
No, it's not. They're not. No, they're
Max Yasgur's farm.
Yeah. Yes.
Oh no.
They're not doing that. They're doing. Santana is playing one night, just Santana's group, and another night, for the other two nights, single bands are playing. The big concert with that Charlatan Lang running it was scheduled for Watkins Glen on the same weekend, and they didn't have any money to pay for this, so that was what was canceled.
That's
today.
The one that was
But
canceled.
there were rumors weeks ago that it was dead. It wasn't going to stay there. It was bye-bye ski.
Well, now the rumors have been confirmed.
Well, actually, the guy who's running it, Lang, says that it's not. That he's still going to do it. But it's total BS. Well, anyway, speaking of someone who could talk about music and BS, or music and musical history, someone who knows rock music, and I'm assuming he knows other genres of music, is our guest today, whose name is Mike Greenblatt. He writes, in some cases, for Closer magazine. I don't know what that is. But Mike, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
By the way, have I mischaracterized the two different Woodstock revivals that are supposedly taking place on the same days?
No, I think you've nailed it. I had no idea that the one at Watkins Glen was in trouble.
It is done. I read the article before I left the house, and I wanted to double check it with multiple sources. And this is what they're saying. They're saying it is done. I mean, which is it's after all the hype. I mean, I'm just kind of shocked.
Yeah, but how much hype? I mean, in reality, there was some hype. I don't know if I call it a lot of hype, because the fact is most people couldn't care less about that. And Mike, as a music historian and as a journalist, do you really care how anyone celebrates the 50th anniversary of a concert?
No.
But you wrote a book. Your book is called Back to Yasgur's Farm. And the book will be published. Correct me if I'm wrong. In June, I believe, and it's a retrospective of Woodstock. And you were there for the original.
June 23rd it comes out, and it's Back to Yasgur's Farm by Mike Greenblatt, and it's about my weekend there. 4 days. I did 32 interviews, read 9 books, put it all together in a tapestry of opinions and viewpoints. But I think there's going to be a plethora of books that come out on this 50th anniversary. Mine will just be one of them, but I think mine will stand out because I took the brown acid. I don't know how many other authors took the brown acid. You know, it's in the movie. They said from the stage, "Don't take the brown acid." And I remember thinking, "Oh, damn it, I just took it."
John tried the red, white, and blue acid.
Have you recovered from it? That's the question.
Yeah, I'm almost glad I took it, because it gave me a hell of a story, and it made what followed at least somewhat surrealistic and palatable, because if I didn't take the brown acid, I would have been bumming out, because Sunday at Woodstock was a nightmare.
By the way, I'm going to assume that you either grew up in one of the outer boroughs or Long Island.
I was born in Brooklyn and raised in Newark, New Jersey.
There you go.
Because to me, everyone I've ever met who went to Woodstock was a Long Island Jew. I mean, and you were there. Did you believe how many people with that accent were rolling around and getting dirty where their parents are going at home? Oh my God, Mindy, she's up there. I don't know what she's doing. I mean, they were all Long Islanders, it seemed to me.
That's so funny. I know that in New Jersey, if you weren't at Woodstock, you were going to see Led Zeppelin in Asbury Park that weekend because that's what we were going to do. But then we kept hearing these commercials of all these bands, and we had to go. So I bought my ticket, $17.50 for all 3 days, and we went actually the day before the festival started. And we were there for 4 days, and Thursday, Friday, and Saturday were idyllic. Although it rained all 3 days, we didn't care. But Sunday, with all the stuff back at the car, the tent, the food, the water, the clothing, the pot, everything back at the car, we didn't even know where the car was. And we were stuck there, and Sunday was a monsoon, a veritable monsoon. And then they said, well, we're going to stop the music for a while, so hold on to each other, and we'll be back. And I remember thinking, as long as the music was on, I'm fine. But then there was no music, and it poured. And I was in my shorts, and the same shorts and T-shirts since Thursday, and I was hungry, and I was thirsty, and I had to go to the bathroom, and I couldn't leave, and it became no fun anymore. And I sort of panicked. Especially when my friend went to find a phone booth to call our moms to tell them we were all right, because the news was reporting that it was a total disaster area, and my mother, little did I know that my mother was sitting by the television freaking out.
Well, I'm just curious, based on your description, if the permits for the now defunct festival were not issued because of suspicions that there could be a return to that. I mean, from what I read, that the town folk up in Woodstock, in Watkins Glen, were not happy about having this festival because they feared.
The real reason they canceled is because the millennials said they would only come if there was enough Chardonnay and Merlot for them, and goat cheese. Well, if you have those three things, they're all good.
Let me tell you something. The tickets, the tickets were supposedly going to be issued for $450. Let me tell you something. For $450, you better give me my Chardonnay and my Brie.
Damn right.
I didn't say Brie. I said goat cheese.
Well,
Feta.
Well, in the Hamptons we call it Brie. We don't.
They're made with different animals, but okay.
Well, I'm just kidding. I don't go to the Hamptons.
Well.
Thank God.
And on that note, Ardina, we're going to have to close up for a few minutes. We have with us today Mike Greenblatt. We haven't spoken about his career, only about the fact that he was an brown acid taking survivor of the Woodstock debacle or concert, however it is you want to phrase it, depending on where you fall in the political and social spectrum. Interestingly, there's all these books about 1969 for two of the three reasons. There's a lot of books about the Mets in 1969. There's a lot of books about Woodstock. But how many books have you seen come out recently about the 50th anniversary of the moon landing? Far less from what I can tell, which I find kind of interesting. Anyway, we'll be back after this Fox News and Business News break. This is Westchester Eye on the radio on WVOX and WVOX.com. Please stick around.
Let's return now to Westchester Eye on the radio with Peter Moses, John Sharan, and Ardina Seward on 1460 WVOX.
Well, if you were dozing, I'm sure that woke you up. That's a Woodstock music vibe. It is loud, it is rocking, and it is what we will not hear at Woodstock since Woodstock got canceled. But anyway, you're listening to Westchester Eye on the radio, and we're talking about Woodstock. I also want to give a shout out to my daughter, Caitlin Marie Saldo Seward. Today is her birthday. So, KK, if you're listening, happy birthday, my darling.
Do you know his birthday's a week from today?
Yes, Willie Mays, but that's for another. That's the show next week.
Do you know his birthday's this coming Sunday?
No.
Peter Moses.
Peter Moses. All right. So,
anyway, let's talk to our guest.
We're getting back to Mike. You're still there. You've heard all about the birthday greetings and yada, 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 yada. And now your book, Back to Yasgur's Farm. How long did it take you? Well, the book is still in the process of being written. Tell us a little bit about the book, about the interviews that you will have. Go ahead. Take the field.
Well, I did 32 interviews. I spoke with members of Jefferson Airplane, Creedence Clearwater Revival, Joe Cocker in 1982. Good thing I asked him about Woodstock in 1982, because that's in the book, as well as members of Sly and the Family Stone, Sha-Na Na, Richie Havens, Tommy James and the Shondells, who turned down Woodstock, and he had an interesting story for the book, Graham Nash, Carlos Santana, a whole bunch of folks. And I weaved it into one story. The thing about it is that over and above the music and the politics and the drugs, it was the only time, I think, in recorded history that 500,000 people were together in one place under those conditions in the horrible weather, and there was not one reported instance of violence, and there was no police force. There was no security. That's the largest city in America, in New York, I should say.
That's because they're all from the Long Island, and they were too busy noshing and getting high that's not true. That's a joke.
That's phenomenal.
Well, that may be true, though. Yeah. That may be true. We were all smoking pot at Woodstock.
But what is the difference? I mean, forgive my naivete, but what is the difference between then and now for this concert, which has been canceled? I mean, there are all sorts of speculation about Lang with the money and the investors.
The lack of money.
Or the lack thereof. Do you think it was the $450 ticket price? Do you think it was, as Peter had alluded to earlier, that it was just a lack of interest? What killed this concert?
I wouldn't even venture a guess. I think the interest was there. As we get closer to the summer, there's going to be a lot of interest in this particular event 50 years ago, because this is its last gasp. Nobody's going to be interested in the 51st, the 52nd, on into perpetuity, but this is it. This is the 50th anniversary of an event that was a cosmic accident.
You know what I find interesting about that? When they had the 20-year concert, they said no one's going to care about this on the 30th, the 40th, the 50th. This is the last gasp, because after this point, we're going to be into our mid to late 40s, or by the 30th, we'll be in our 50s. And so this is the last gap. I don't know that when you have a name brand, if there's ever a complete last gasp. John, what do you think?
I think you're right, Peter, because the fact is that the Bethel Music Center up there. Yes, the Bethel Music Center up there basically has a museum to Woodstock, because I don't think anybody who goes there these days actually went to the original event, but they use
some of them did.
Well, very few. I mean, the numbers are less than they used to be, and the reality is that it's a nice place to watch music that they've developed up there now, but they're using Woodstock as a means,
it's a marketing tool,
and as an opportunity to remind people. So I mean, you're going to lose out, and you've already lost out, I'm sure, on some of the people who lived through Woodstock, because they just aren't around anymore. And as time passes by, there'll be fewer and fewer left. It's like in you know that I do the military show. It's like we're losing World War II veterans, and pretty soon we're not going to have many of those left at all.
Did you see? I'm curious, Mike. Did you see? You had 32 interviews. Did you see a consistent thread through all of the people that you spoke with?
Now, they all had wildly disparate stories. Some of them had fun. Some of them, it was just another gig. Some of them were there and they didn't want to be there. There was a different story for each guy. It was amazing how it all came together, though. As I say, it was a cosmic accident. That museum, by the way, is really nice. The films that they show and the artifacts, and they have a beautiful open-air venue that John Fogerty will be performing at August 18th. I guess it's the only game in town now that the big one's been canceled.
Do you think that's going to drive traffic to the, like literally and figuratively, do you think that's going to drive traffic to that event?
Well, that weekend, yeah. Yeah, August 15, 16, and 17 on the 50th anniversary of the Woodstock Festival, to go back to where it happened, go to that museum, eat at those restaurants, see an open-air concert. I think they're going to be pretty busy.
Wow, because they were expecting, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think they had a capacity of 15,000. Now, do you think that the crowd will exceed that? Because now that the Watkins Glen...
Well, I can tell you from experience that I think it will exceed that, simply because I went to see the Eagles there a few years ago. Oh. And the Eagles drew roughly about 60,000 people to that event. So it was it took pretty much forever to get out of there, I can tell you that much.
Oh, man, that's going to be... then it's going to get very, very, very interesting. So, are you planning on coming to Bethel or Bethel?
Bethel.
Bethel.
Ask him.
I like Bethel.
Ask Mike. Mike, what is it called?
It's called Bethel. It rhymes with my Aunt Ethel.
Bethel. Okay, I like Bethel. Seems to have a little snap to it.
Bethel makes it Jewish.
But it sounds very, very French. I kind of like that.
French?
Yeah, it does. Bethel.
That doesn't sound French at all.
It has a kind of place. Now, what musicians that performed at the original Woodstock will actually be playing at Bethel?
I don't know the lineup, but all I know is that John Fogerty's going to be there. I think Melanie's going to be there. I think Arlo Guthrie's going to be there.
I know for a fact that Santana's doing one of the nights.
Santana was scheduled for Watkins Glen, so I hope he plays at Bethel. That would be great to see him again.
By the way, of the acts that you saw at the original Woodstock, which is the one that most hit you?
Good question. I would have to say Joe Cocker was the zenith, because after Joe Cocker set, that's when the monsoon came.
Wow.
And Joe Cocker's set, it was a brilliantly sunny Sunday afternoon, perfect weather, and he really got the crowd going crazy. Also, the Great Mountain.
We're gonna have to cut you off there. We can be more nostalgic after our break. This is Westchester Eye on the radio. We're talking to Mike Greenblatt about the 50th anniversary, the geriatric anniversary of the Woodstock revival,
and his book.
And we're going to go to break now. This is, as I said, it's Westchester Eye on the radio on WVOX, WVOX.com. Please come back. Don't get too high during the break. If you have the munchies, go eat something. We'll be right back.
Let's return now to Westchester Eye on the radio with Peter Moses, John Sharan, and Ardina Seward on 1460 WVOX.
And folks, that's some music from Sly and the Family Stone, reminding us all of their participation in the great Woodstock Music Festival 50 years ago.
Do you know what the name of that song is?
We're all in here dancing.
No,
too.
I don't
Imagine
actually.
That.
It's called Higher. It's called Higher.
There you go.
I want to take you higher.
And our guest is Mike Greenblatt, author of the new book, soon to be coming out, not out yet, Woodstock 50th Anniversary, Back to Yasgur's Farm. And Mike, tell us a little bit about the book. Is there I know that you were there. You have some personal reminiscences. You mentioned a lot of interviews. How about the artwork? Is there a lot of good photography in there?
It's festooned with dozens and dozens of pictures, some of which have never been seen before. Plus, I have a section in the middle of the book that's a lot of fun. It has every single artist, the instrumentation, the songs, the time they got on, the time they got off, and their best albums. That was fun to do.
I'll bet it was. Now, you've planned to do this clearly for a long time when you talk about, being able to do one a long time ago with Joe Cocker. And the reality is that this is something that I don't know. Do you think people at the time regarded this as an event that would be remembered 50 years later?
There was a sense on Friday that the whole world was watching, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think Arlo brought it home when he held up the New York Post that said "Traffic stalled at Hippie Fest." And he said that famous line, "They closed the thruway, man." Yeah, we knew the whole world was watching, and when the food ran out, we knew the whole world was watching too. At one point, there were helicopters that came overhead and were dropping thousands and thousands of what I thought were little food packages down for us, but it wasn't food. It was flowers. They dropped hundreds of thousands of flowers on us. But
were they edible flowers?
No, and that's what I said.
No,
the flowers, then food.
That's incredible.
So how long did you go without eating?
I survived on other people's largesse. I remember there were these bikers, guys that you would be scared to meet in a dark alley at home, were making fires because it got really cold after the rain went away. And we huddled by the various fires that they made. They helped us out with food. Townspeople came on flatbed trucks giving out loaves of bread. In fact, that's where I got the brown acid from. One nice elderly lady, she must have been in her 40s, gave me a loaf of bread and a hit of acid.
And you married her when?
I gotta ask you. I know you had said prior to the commercial that there was a turnout of something like 500,000, which I find it remarkable that there was not violence, that nobody was shot, nobody was stabbed. How the heck did that happen?
No rapes, no arsons, no physical violence, not one reported fight even.
But what do you attribute that to?
It's impossible. That could never happen. It had never happened before, and it certainly could never happen again. We were sort of united. We needed each other. I know I needed my neighbor to give me food and water and drugs.
And what did you give to your neighbor in return?
He can't. He can't reveal it.
He said nothing.
Absolutely nothing. There were some of the people that were doers, and they helped everybody, and there were other people like me who was so stoned, I just stood there and looked and freaked out and thought, oh my God, what is going on around here?
I have an odd question. Did you keep your clothes from Woodstock? Do you still have them?
No. No. At one point, I divested myself of all my clothes and went swimming and just put them on a rock. And I thought to myself, what if someone took my clothes? But no one did. I went swimming. I met a very nice young lady in the lake. I asked her to come back to our site. Told her, hey, we got a great site. We're right in front of the stage. You want to come back with us? Well, she said no. She was there with her boyfriend. I'll never forget her. You know, I never even got her name. It's one of those images in time, a real 60s image.
Now, Mike, you've been a music journalist for quite a long time. Was this the event that inspired you to become a music journalist?
I would say it would have to be because my mother wouldn't let me go to Shea Stadium when the Beatles played in 1964. I was only 13, and rightfully so. I was really mad at that. So I got my revenge 5 years later by going to Woodstock, and I realized that at Woodstock was when I came to the realization that everything will be fine as long as the music is playing. And that has lasted me my whole life. And it wasn't but 4 years later that I wrote my first story for a local New Jersey paper before walking into the offices of the Aquarian Weekly, and I asked the guy, can I write? And I wound up staying there. I'm still writing for the Aquarian Weekly.
And, you know, in all your time in music, how have you seen it evolve? I mean, have you liked in the directions that it's gone, or do you think that things should have stayed more the way they were? Well,
I must admit, my aptitude for rock atrophied in the 90s, and my experimental adventurism came out in other genres. I can't seem to get into any rock bands that started in the mid-'80s on. Sure, there's some exceptions. I like the Police, the Cars, Cheap Trick, but I think it's because they're not blues-based anymore. I realize now that all the rock and roll bands that I loved back in the 60s, from the Stones, the Animals, the Kinks, Jethro Tull, all those British rock bands, they all played blues.
Mm-hmm.
And once that was extracted from the from the scene, I don't get U2. I don't get Pearl Jam. I don't get any of these new bands. And I fall back on my blues-based rock bands, plus now, of course, jazz, Latin, gospel, everything.
Yeah, I don't know about you two, but I'm in the same boat. I mean, the epitome of rock music to me was Jethro Tull, number 1, Led Zeppelin, number 2, and I guess and The Who, number 3. The Stones and Beatles aren't on my list of top 3 because, at least to my ear, even at the time, it sounded very assembly music, whereas these other 3 bands were trying to break new ground, and I never got. I mean, Jethro Tull was my favorite group of all time.
Wow, you got to see Martin Barr and his octet.
I know.
Which is the real Jethro Tull.
I know. They're coming and playing Tarrytown. And my daughter has a friend who's her age. My daughter's 26. And he took me to Jethro Tull at the Capitol where I used to work a couple of years ago. Ian Anderson's voice is gone. But Martin Barr is coming to play in Tarrytown. And I think he's going to get us tickets.
He blew me away. He's got a guy that sings those songs the way they're supposed to be sung.
You mean someone with an actual singing voice?
There's a new guy that does the singing, and he's brilliant.
But has a voice. Ian Anderson never had a voice. He just could write.
Ian used to have a voice. Now he's gone.
No voice. Yeah, he's shot. He's shot.
We're speaking with Mike Greenblatt, longtime music journalist and the author of Woodstock 50th Anniversary, Back to Yasgur's Farm. And Mike, as music has developed, have you seen a situation where we now, with social media and with YouTube and things like that, people can get away from the commercialization that seemed to happen in the 90s and the early part of the 21st century? Do you think that that's going to lead itself back to a truer form of music?
That's a good point. The whole thing about people not listening to whole albums anymore, like the artist intends, and cherry-picking certain cuts, sort of led to a dissolution of interest in the first place. But it led new kids, younger kids, into the fray.
Right.
So who's to say which is better?
And certainly some of them are breaking new ground. I know that Peter was keen for artists who did that. I think that we see much more transitions. I see that country music and rap actually have merged in certain areas with certain artists, and it's
country rap.
Oh yeah,
this is news to me.
Well, then it's what can I tell you that's something out there that has gotten some of the traditional country artists upset, but it's certainly gotten a larger mainstream audience for those artists.
Yeah, hip-hop has permeated itself into the fabric of modern music to the point where even the new album by a 60s act, Tommy James and the Shondells, has a rapper on it.
Oh, no.
It's true, and I like it. It's good. It's really good. He does Dragging the Line and some of his other songs redone, remixed, rearranged, and some of them include raps. That sounds really good. It's just spoken word poetry with a beat. I like it.
Yeah, well, there's an artist like Sam Hunt in country who's got that transition as well.
No doubt.
This is news. Is this news to you, Ardina?
I've never heard of country rap.
Look for Sam Hunt.
I mean, but look what happened with Aerosmith. Aerosmith's career was over, and then they did Run DMC did their Walk This Way with Aerosmith, and they were reborn. And they're still going. I don't know if they're still going strong, but until a couple of years ago, they were still going strong. The music industry always evolves. There's no other choice but to evolve.
It's like a shark. It never stands still. You're listening to Westchester Eye on the radio here on WVOX 1460 AM and heard worldwide at WVOX.com. I'm John Charan, along with Peter Moses and Ardina Seward, and our special guest, longtime music journalist and author Mike Greenblatt, who's coming out with a new book in July called Woodstock 50th Anniversary, Back to Yasgur's Farm. And we'll be back with more with Mike right after this.
With world and national news, here
1460 WVOX.
Let's return now to Westchester Eye on the Radio with Peter Moses, John Sharan, and Ardina Seward on 1460 WVOX.
It's getting to the point where I'm no fun anymore. I'm sorry. Sometimes it hurts so badly I must cry out loud.
And that are the dulcet tones of Crosby, Stills, and Nash before Young up at Woodstock back 50 years ago. And the reason that we have them on the show today is because our special guest is Mike Greenblatt, a longtime music journalist who is also the author of the new book, Woodstock 50th Anniversary, Back to Yasgur's Farm. That'll be out later this summer. It's available for pre-order at Amazon. And Mike, of all the groups that you, or all the acts, I should say, that you saw at Woodstock, did you get to see any of them and to get to know any of them in a way that made you change your impression of your first impression? First impressions can often be very wrong about somebody. So in your time as a journalist, I'm sure you got to speak to a lot of them. How many of them turned out to be the way they appeared, and how many of them turned out to be something different?
Graham Nash has turned out to be actually a friend. And by the way, it was indeed Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young at Woodstock.
Ah, okay. Mm-hmm.
I didn't even know that, and I was there. Mm-hmm. When I interviewed Graham, he goes, "Hey, don't forget Neil was there." The fact is that Neil...
That was their first concert together.
First or second, correct, yeah. He refused to be photographed. He refused to be in the movie, and thus nobody thinks he was even there. They think it's Crosby, Stills, and Nash. But Nash has proven himself to be a really righteous individual. Santana, I've interviewed a number of times. He's a real hippy-dippy. He's so mystic, and his talk is peppered with all kinds of phrases from the Maharishi, and he's just such a cool guy. But he's real. He's not. It's not an effort for him. That's the way he really is.
Does he talk? Does he ever talk about the Baal Shem Tov? That's what I want to know.
Does he talk about what?
The Baal Shem Tov.
I don't know.
The person who created Hasidic Judaism, I'm sure he didn't. I have a question for you. You worked a lot with photographers, right?
Yes.
Did you ever work with Fred McDowell from the Village Voice?
I do not.
You did not? Okay. He was the Village Voice chief photographer for 50 years. He's the one who took all the iconic pictures of Dylan and the whole folk music scene, the singer-songwriter world. Fred chronicled that for 50 years. Surprised you didn't work with him, because his photography is still all over the place, and especially 50th anniversary of Woodstock. He was there, and he shot a lot of those things. And his son Tim McNara, who was a reporter at the Post with me, is a very close friend. So I'm surprised about that. Now, when you interviewed these people, the musicians who were there, any bittersweet memories for them that surprised you? Things you didn't know about? Things that didn't go the way they were supposed to?
Well, nothing went the way it was supposed to.
I know that. I realize
weekend. And a lot of the people that I spoke to said that it was very rough and tough. The backstage area was impossible to deal with. They didn't know what time they were going on. They had to wait backstage hours and hours and hours. Jimi Hendrix was very nice. He sat in a lawn chair for hours, not going on. He didn't get on until 10 o'clock the next Monday morning. Everyone had left. He played to a sea of garbage. They offered him maybe 30,000 stragglers out of 500,000 stayed. But to a man, they all said how it was such a cluster of inoperable procedures where they didn't know what was going on backstage.
I mean, I remember reading that Grace Slick was in a really terrible mood and would only come in or out via helicopter. Just helicoptered in for her set and then left. That's what I think I read that somewhere.
Yeah, and contrasting to her, Joan Baez had the time of her life and partied backstage with everyone and did her Joe Cocker imitation, and she was hilarious. She came on, it must have been 3 o'clock in the morning. Everybody was sleeping. She played to a sleeping village, but she had a great time. Others wandered out into the crowd and soaked up the vibe. John Fogerty was extremely upset with his band's performance, even though they were good, refusing to be in the movie and starting a lifelong fight with the other 2 members of the band that they don't even talk anymore. Pete Townsend didn't want to be there. He not only kicked Abby Hoffman off the stage with the butt of his guitar, but he kicked filmmaker Michael Wadley right in the back. He didn't like the scene.
I can understand why. I mean, he was very much a perfectionist and someone who liked to be in control of his band. I imagine, Tull wasn't there, but Ian Anderson was impossible to work with for everybody. I mean, he was a pile driver. He was someone who wanted to have things done his way all the time. We're going to have to finish up with you for this segment, and we're going to play some music at the end. But before we do, first of all, I want to thank you. And John, once again, read the title of the book and who's the publisher.
The title of the book is Woodstock, 50th Anniversary, Back to Yasgur's Farm, and the publisher, I'm going to have to check here on the internet.
Well, I'm sure you know.
Is
Mike?
Krause Publications.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
Krause Publications, and it'll be out June 23rd. I'll be back at Bethel Hills doing a book signing during the 50th anniversary, and I also will be at various Barnes & Nobles leading up to that.
Well, I hope when you go to Bethel Woods that you find your way to Bethel Woods after that, because you're going to the wrong synagogue. You're going to a synagogue instead of to a to where Woodstock took place. You could just call it Bethel Woods, by the way.
I really appreciate you having me on, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Mike.
So, guys, next week we have a couple minutes to talk about this. A lot of things are happening the first week in May. I mean, we have Willie Mays' birthday.
The brown-eyed handsome man.
Yes. Is that what he was called by somebody?
Don't you remember the song Center Field? It's
yes.
about Willie Mays.
Yes. I never knew that was the brown. I thought the brown-eyed center fielder was Mickey Mantle, but okay.
No.
And next Saturday is the 49th anniversary of the Kent State Massacre, which, if you think about it in today's world, would fit in.
Absolutely, a time of revolution.
Yeah,
it's a pity that we have to revisit that, but it is what it is.
It is what it is. It's for me, it's very personally a sad day because one of the 4 killed was a cousin of mine. My grandfather called me up on May 5th, which is my birthday, and he had a thick German accent, and he said to me, "Hello, Peter, it's Grandpa. I want to wish you a happy birthday when your cousin was murdered." I went, "Excuse me?"
Jeez,
it's a fine combination.
Yeah, he was not a coarse man whatsoever. He was a very quiet, gentle man. But how do you tell somebody that? I mean, I was turning 14 years old, and that was it was a real seminal day in my life. I know it was for the rest of the country, but for me it was a little more personal because she was my cousin. I never met her. Her last name was Scheuer. But next week we have on someone who comes on every year around this time. He is a former New York Post, former Daily News, former NBC.com, former Star Magazine editor, Dick Belsky. Dick is going to come on and speak about his new book. He writes his novels.
I like his books.
Are about journalists performing their jobs. Mm-hmm. And it's a dead world for the most part because that's not what journalists do anymore. But we'll talk to Dick about the old days and his new book. This is Westchester Eye. This is Westchester Eye on the radio on WVOX and WVOX.com. You guys have a great week.